So welcome to the 2020 meeting of the Energy Charter Independent Accountability Panel. Thank you for the disclosure from the Energy Charter itself, and welcome to the meeting. Before we start, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, you probably know the panel: Claire Petrie, the Chair, Cassandra Goldie, CEO of ACOS, and Andrew Richards, CEO of EUAA. I will let you introduce yourselves, but in doing so, say what we're saying to everyone we meet with, that we have to upfront acknowledge the year that's been, in that it's been unprecedented and unlike any others in terms of fire, floods, and the COVID pandemic in particular. You may want to reference this, but really I'm going to pass to you and just ask you to talk about your view of the last year in terms of the Energy Charter, its positives and any negatives, where it has come to, where it might have been to, if not for other factors, and then we can open it up for general discussion. So putting on your other hat, Ben, as Chair of the CEO Council for the Energy Charter, I'll pass to you for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Claire and Cassandra and Andrew. Thanks for your time and nice to be here. And as you say, so my day job is CEO of AGIG, so one of the member companies, but I'm also privileged to have the role this year as Chair of the CEO Council. I'm the Chair, I'm not the CEO, so I'm not in charge of the Energy Charter. I've just had the privilege of having that chair role. And I think it really has been an extraordinary year for the Energy Charter. And if I think back 8 years or so ago now, I was one of the executives at UK Power Networks, which is the electricity distribution network for London. And during the time that I was with that business, we had the London Olympics. And we were very, very involved with the London Olympics and a bit of a sort of window seat on what it's like to run an Olympics. And the thing that really is striking about that is you're building something from scratch. It's an organization that has to deliver in a very complex way, but at the same time, it has to establish itself and build itself up from scratch. And in a funny kind of way, the Energy Charter actually reminds me of that. We've been in a position this year where it's about delivery. This is year 2 of the Energy Charter, so it's about delivery. But also we've had customers, clearly the pandemic to deal with, but also at the same time, we're still building this thing. And this is a new and pretty unique initiative. I'm not aware in other similar markets to Australia, deregulated, unbundled electricity markets and gas markets like Australia. I'm not aware of other organisations like this, which really cross the whole value chain and are not inward focused, i.e. what can we deliver for our members, but actually outward focused on the customers. So we're trying to build something new here. And at the same time, we're trying to deliver, and against, like everybody else, this level of disruption. And I think I'm very, very impressed, I have to say, with the work that Sabine has done and everybody else who's committed their time to this organisation, because I think we have gone through a year of really laying really strong internal foundations for future success. And I think if I think back to the beginning of the year, we were quite internally focused, I would say, at the Energy Charter, really, having come through the first year, the lessons learned from that, the changes that needed to be made. We were really quite internally focused and also focused on the IAP process. And what we managed to achieve over the course of this year is actually fix up those internal issues and get back focused on the customer. And in parallel to that organizational work, there has been a whole bunch of really excellent work across Better Together initiatives, and I'll pass to Sabine in a minute just to sort of summarize some of those. But I think, what have we done? We've stabilized, fixed the energy charter. We've got it back focused on the customer. We've delivered the kind of big thing that we said we would deliver at the end of last year, which is a commitment by the members to disclose CSAT and NPS, so that external stakeholders got an ability to get an overall sense on that. We've done that, I think, if you look across the disclosures. And we've also initiated and pushed forward a whole bunch of really good Better Together initiatives, which I think actually are starting to make a difference. But more importantly, almost than that, are just establishing the culture of what the Energy Charter is, which is this kind of levelling up, friendly competition, highest common denominator. How can we sort of outdo each other in terms of what we're delivering? So I think, it's not been an easy year. And, like everyone, we've been disrupted by the crisis, but not as much as our customers. But I think we can actually be reasonably proud of what we've achieved over the last year. But I'll pass to Sabine now to add a bit more on that.
Thanks, Ben, for that introduction. Perhaps just to add, certainly it has been a really challenging year on a number of levels, but that's also given us many more opportunities to go above and beyond for customers. And that's certainly what we're driving in the Energy Charter. The Better Together initiatives have blossomed from nothing to something. We now have almost 20 of them. We've started from customer pain points. We've co-designed better outcomes, including importantly, with customers and end users. We've used an innovation framework to ideate, incubate and accelerate in alignment with those Energy Charter commitments. And all of those things are new. I'd like to say that this is a sector that has, collaboration across the supply chain deep in its DNA, but that's not the case. And so we really are paving, new roads into how we work. And at a personal level, I think I'm most proud of our our ways of working, because it really demonstrates that culturally we have a group of Energy Charter champions, including at a CEO level, that are really wanting to do more for customers. Are we there yet? Of course not. We're in year 2, but I feel very confident that we have the architecture and a firm and stable beginning or foundations for increased and accelerated outcomes for customers.
Thank you. Look, before I pass to Cassandra and Andrew, can I ask, obviously not all energy businesses are signatories to the Charter. Why not? And is it they are just waiting to see what sort of beast this becomes? Or is it simply not attractive to them? Is it something about them, or is it something about the Charter? Do you have a view on why there are still companies out there that haven't been inclined to sign?
Yeah, maybe I'll make a few comments and then pass to Sabine. I think there's a little bit of sitting on the fence and waiting to see, as you say, what this thing turns into and whether the external stakeholder and customer community regards it as important before people decide to jump in, because it is a commitment. There's no question about that. There's a dollar commitment. It's not very big, but there is a dollar commitment. But probably more significantly, there's a time commitment, and there's a sort of bit of an exposure and reputational commitment as well as coming into it. And I think, with some of the sort of internally focused issues that we had in the first half of the year, that probably gave a pause in terms of our ability to go out and push for more people to come in. But I do think now we have good momentum in the second half of the year. And I do think that, the outcomes for customers are different and better because the Energy Charter exists. I think we can point to a whole bunch of things that would not have happened if it weren't for the Energy Charter. And so I would hope, Sabine and I are both aware of a number of businesses that are thinking about it. And I would hope that people would have the confidence now to start joining and coming in. Sabine?
I'd only add to say, pleasingly, in a number of our Better Together initiatives, we do have non-signatory businesses. And so we certainly have not set this up to be a closed shop. We understand that in order to deliver better outcomes for customers, the more businesses involved, the better. So if they can sort of get a sense of what this is all about through the Better Together initiatives, then we're very pleased to have them involved as part of that conversation.
Oh, thank you. I wasn't aware of that, and that's a good move to include whoever will come.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Cassandra, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks both. I'm particularly keen to get a sense of being of the, you talk about the sort of 20 different Better Together initiatives, and some, you know, are deep and substantial, I suspect, and some that you're struggling to get traction with it. So I just want to invite you to be as frank as you can about where you see the meat and where actually, you know, it's really hard work to get it going.
Yeah, thanks, Cassandra. That's a great question. It's something that keeps me up at night.
Mm-hmm.
We have 12 months into the Better Together initiatives, we have done a deep dive with all the participants involved, and that includes end user representatives, to understand what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how can we focus on continuous improvement. As a result of that, we have implemented some changes for the coming 12 months. I think what we've found is we've got lots of passionate people. The identification of customer pain points, I'm sure this won't surprise you, has not been that difficult. In fact, we are overwhelmed with those. One of the challenges is how do we prioritise those? And how do we make sure amongst the businesses that we have the right people and people at the right level that can drive the sort of outcomes we're looking for? So over the next 12 months, what we will be looking to do is ensure that there is senior executive sponsorship of Better Together initiatives. While we've had a lot of initiatives come up with genuine passion from people in the businesses, sadly and perhaps inevitably, if people don't have the okay from senior people within their business, unfortunately, it just can't be prioritised. They all have day jobs. Secondly, we want to make it clear how we work in these Better Together initiatives. There is an expectation of a cultural shift. There's got to be a genuine focus on customers, and they need to deliver. So we need to have very clear KPIs in terms of what those outcomes look like and some accountability around that. We now report directly to the CEO Council on a quarterly basis in terms of have those KPIs been met. Importantly, I think we need to reframe these Better Together initiatives. And this is often an issue for innovative projects and initiatives. They're seen as little innovative things, pilots, projects, whatever you might call them, that are nice to have, but not necessary. We need to reframe the conversation from innovative projects that sort of look great but aren't necessarily changing or influencing Signatory strategy to something that is genuinely influencing strategy, structure, and the culture of those businesses. And that is what we are aiming to do. I guess, you know, finally, I would say we have lots and lots of passionate people involved in these, over 150. I was surprised to learn when we sort of, you know, did all of this deep dive work. We want to make sure that it is broader than that, but still manageable. Obviously, you know, the Energy Charter is not a huge organisation. It is absolutely an organisation that depends on signatories getting their hands dirty, but we need to make sure at the same time that we're focusing on priorities and delivering for customers and communities.
Yeah. And if I can ask, in terms of participation in this sort of shared work in particular, from outside of the signatory group, you know, when you're engaging with consumer advocates, you know, external community engagement, you've picked up probably, Ben, from the earlier meeting, you know, I think the reality is the community is changing under our feet in terms of what's coming. and the consumer advocates will be exhausted and stretched, you know. And so the resourcing of this work, is that an issue? If so, what can we do about that? Because participation, real participation, is going to be required, and what you can't keep it thin and dropping in and out occasionally to have a view. Otherwise, you just get a big list of stuff, don't you, of issues.
Yeah, I mean, I might comment on that, Cassandra, and then let Sabine add. I think some of it, as we move into next year and we do get more mature, and I think, you know, Sabine alluded to it, I think there's a bit of a high grading process probably to be done, you know, and as you said as well, which are the initiatives which really are going to make a difference, you know, can be delivered, and if they are delivered will make a difference, and probably a bit of high grading to really focus in on those so that people's limited time is used most effectively. I think that is right. You know, we've got a large number of people from the members involved, and we just need to make sure that time is used as efficiently as it can be.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I'd agree with that. I mean, one of the things that we've talked to the consumer advocates about is this idea of a customer insights lab. So the feedback that we got is, not surprisingly, with their limited resources, they can't be involved in the Better Together initiatives from the get-go to the end, but they can provide strategic advice and guidance for those that align with their KPIs. And this is really important as well. So what we have co-designed, and will be something that comes to life this year, is the idea that there would be a couple of touch points during the year. They would be, through this Customer Insights Lab, give the advocates the ability to see Better Together initiatives, not fully formed, because we obviously want guidance and suggestions in terms of how they could be better, but to get feedback. Are these priorities for advocates and end user representatives? If not, why are we doing them, to Ben's point? But if they are, and they align with the KPIs or strategic priorities of the consumer advocates, how could we work better with them to bring them to life? And what are the resourcing restraints that we need to be very cognizant in terms of bringing them to life?
So just on that last one then, I mean, it is one of the key issues. Cass is right around having enough time and consumer resources to engage in everything, and it's a double-edged sword. We want to be engaged in more things like the ISP and all those sorts, but you know, it's like a group of C-grade celebrities. You see the same people doing the same thing, and I mean, every time I turn up to one of those meetings, you know, Gavin's there and the same people are there, and that's so you build up a great pool of knowledge amongst a very small group of people, and they just can't keep doing that. So within that, is there an advocate support and knowledge uplift type program that we could start to initiate here, where, because we need more advocates capable of meaningful engagement. It's good for you and it's good for us. So is there some Better Together initiative or something that comes out of the lab you're talking about that's about that uplift and support and getting a broader knowledge base?
Yeah, look, it's a great question, Andrew, and it's something that we've talked about in the Know Your Customers and Communities Better Together initiative amongst those group, and they are primarily the stakeholder engagement folk within the signatories. But we've also included the water industry, which is really exciting, because one of the things the water industry have done, of course, is, well, maybe leapfrogged is the wrong word, but they go directly to customers. And so we've had discussions about this. How do we ensure that we can broaden the base of advocates that are better resourced to assist us? And I think this would be something that we'd be very keen to focus on over the next 12 months.
I mean, no disrespect to water guys, but they've got a pretty simple product. Electricity and gas, you know, the complexity is mind-boggling. And when you start talking about, you know, regulated price resets, and it's mind-boggling, and it's you almost need a PhD in economics to get through some of this stuff. So the and a couple of people should have been talking about the simplification of how you communicate, and distill it, to your point, Sabine, too. distilling it down to what's really important, what's really impactful. And that's where you start with a new group of advocates to at least get a base level of knowledge. And then through that process, I mean, and there's plenty of us who are in the game already who can more than happy to share our knowledge, because it means we don't have to do everything. So I think that's a really important thing going forward as we continue to build complexity, and we will, to get a more, I don't like to use the word educated, but knowledgeable group of advocates who can play a role.
I think hopefully also the Energy Charter can deliver some efficiencies to stakeholders as well, because it does create an opportunity for you to engage with the members as a group, rather than having to do it all individually, and also to access information, right? So now the CSAT NPS reporting, you can access that all in one place, and these open house sessions that we're now standing up with stakeholders, again, it's an easy way for people to reach a whole bunch of companies in one go.
So it's in using that Better Together platform, then it could be an opportunity in the future to actually bring together some policy work, and actually have that kind of involvement in the policy work. So it's a far more efficient way of doing it, rather than us all sort of doing our bits and pieces. I mean, where's the collaboration there on policy and regulation? Might be something, whether it be CAGATI or transmission access reform or pipeline regulation. I mean, there was the pipeline RIS in December. It would have been a great opportunity then to really maybe expand it as part of that. So I know there was some work, but yeah, probably didn't bring in enough advocates to that. So,
and in a forum which goes across the value chain, because other forums don't do that. They're at one level of the value chain.
Yeah, everyone's focused on their slice of value, and it's completely understandable. But as a consumer, as you've alluded to before, Ben, I mean, we don't look at the slices of the pie. We just look at the whole pie and what that means. Yeah. Can I ask a question about the maturity model?
Do you want to go next, Andrew, and then I'll back?
Yeah, ask about that, Andrew, and then we'll come back to you, Cass.
Sorry, I messed up the feng shui. Sorry, Cass.
Go for it.
So reading through the disclosures and how people have approached their self-assessment on the maturity model has been interesting. Some have put some empirical evidence behind and justified the position they've adopted with some empirical evidence, whether it be a CSAT score or net promoter or a range of other things. Where others seems to be a bit more of a, I reckon I'm pretty good. So how do we get more of consistency around how that's evaluated is one question. And secondly, once everyone's evolved and is moved into, sort of everyone's empowered and we've all got to their great, then what? Do we then need to evolve it again further than that? And so how do we get more consistency around how people are doing a self-evaluation? And then once you've all got to that great point in 2 or 3 years' time, it can't stop there. So what's the next iteration?
I mean, I would think it might be an area I would guess that the panel might address in its report, and you may summarise where people have ranked themselves, and you may have a view on what you think it looks like to be at each level, right? And I think just again, we talked about last year being a sort of bit of a step into the dark, and this year being more of a known quantity. But actually, on the maturity assessment, this is the first year. So I think just actually the act of each of the companies being able to see what other people have done, that will, I think, drive more alignment next year. People who've maybe taken one approach, they might look at it, oh, okay, well, actually, most people have taken a different approach. Maybe I'll slightly recalibrate. So I think just the transparency actually will drive that a little bit. But it might well be something the panel might want to.
So I'd say a lot of people have looked at what they do and then placed themselves in the maturity model, rather than what was the outcome as the guide to where you are in the maturity model. So just because you're doing something doesn't mean you're actually delivering the outcome, as you well know. So
that's a great observation, right?
What does the outcome look like, and where does that sit on the maturity model, rather than what you're doing? And what you're doing might get you there, but you're probably not there yet just because you put a system in place or whatever. So, yeah.
And Andrew, to your point about continuous improvement, the expectation is that the model will move over time. So it's certainly not static. There is a commitment across the Energy Charter signatories to constantly improving. So it's a maturity model for now, but we would expect that it would shift over time in light and in line with community expectations about what good and better looks like.
Okay, good.
Because I think that that was definitely an ongoing discussion for us in the last round about trying to sift through a lot of activity to really see what was changing. And so that progress that you've made on the sort of shared disclosure over the CSAT and MPS, that's an example of just going, right, let's actually all see that. What would you see as being the next stage of putting the heat on that kind of shared disclosure about change?
And I think I mentioned this in the previous session. You know, I think we're actively discussing at the moment what will be the next year's version of the CSAT commitment. And one of the things which I think is under consideration is you know, answering the question, how can you demonstrate that the boards, the executive management of the members are close to that frontline experience? You know, what we and again, it'll be a lot of companies will feel that they're already doing that, but actually, you know, demonstrate that and demonstrate how that drives the way the decisions are made and therefore the way that outcomes for customers evolve. I think that may well be something that we look at trying to demonstrate next year.
Okay. Because Ben, I was going to just invite you to sort of re-answer that question in the other session.
Yes.
A bit more just in this broader view. So Ben, we just talked about, you know, we've been through bushfires, COVID, it's grim. And whatever you view about the federal budget yesterday, there is a widely shared view that this could be very, very tricky. The next stage of what goes on for people, jobs, incomes, the economy, businesses. You know, there are going to be businesses who, once all the, you know, various protections come off, they're just going to go under. Size and scale of bad debt, for example, could be eye-watering, actually. So we figure this is a really key report for us to, we don't want to be in fantasy land here. We know there is some real hard yakka work that people are going to have to you know, focus on. And so your views about what are the most important things you would want, if you know, the principles of this charter to be at the top of the list, to be, for a panel like us, to be guiding the signatories to say, this is the most important work you've got to work together better on to deliver. So it's an invitation for you to, you know, provide that advice to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, because of, you know, what's happening out there on the front line and what will happen as we go into next year with the customers, I think, you know, a focus and a demonstration, you know, how does the golden thread between what is happening around the executive table and the board table and what is actually happening to the frontline customer experience, how are those two things linked? And you know, members, you've given us some visibility now on your CSAT MPS performance, but please explain how you're actually across what's driving that and what's actually happening out there and how you're reacting to it. And please demonstrate that you really understand what's going on out there.
And I think as well, Ben, it's not only about reacting to it, it's partly about anticipating it and not waiting till the tsunami hits, but putting those protections in place so that people aren't washed away in the swell.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Claire. I think it's very well put. You know, if you're not close to the front line, it comes through eventually, but it's very much then a lagging indicator. And by then, you know, a lot of pain is felt, a lot of damage is done. It's how are you visible on the front line? How do you know what's going on out there? How are you picking up those early signs, as we discussed previously, that, you know, maybe distress is now starting to mount a little bit in Victoria, for example.
And in a way, those things come together because it is about that initial basic principle about knowing your customers and understanding the segment, so that, and having access to their homes and information, a lot of information about them, either through smart meters or field staff who go out and are actually physically present. So using that information to put that picture together to say things aren't getting better, or they are, or they could. And I think that's where the challenge is for all the businesses.
I think it's absolutely knowing our customers, but it's also knowing our own businesses and actually understanding what the customer experience is like of our own processes. You know, it's not always the case that we're aware of, and Sabine talked about customer pain points earlier. Are we really all truly aware of the customer pain points in our own businesses and processes? I couldn't say that necessarily we're aware of all of them all the time. So it's knowing our customers, but it's also understanding ourselves and how we actually present, and are we joined up, or are we making the customer do the work?
So can I share one of the very exciting Better Together initiatives that has come up since this report? And that is to build on the Gemina Deloitte research that was done mid-year around the vulnerable customer experience through COVID. This has now been taken to a new level, so it will go over 12 months. There will be 4 surveys of over 3,000 customers across Australia taken. There are 6 contributing parties to that, including non-Energy Charter signatories, which is really exciting. And I think, to your point, Claire, this will drive an awareness that is beyond sort of reacting, but being incredibly proactive. And I think where the Energy Charter is very unique is it's not just businesses looking at their own customers, but there certainly are, I'll call them gentle nudges across the supply chain to ensure that no matter where you are very cognizant of what is going on for mums and dads, for small business, for C&I customers. And that visibility hasn't always been there, particularly if you're further up the supply chain. So what we're encouraging is not just businesses to look at their own customer base, but to really share that information across them so they get a much clearer picture of what is going on, and take responsibility for what that means they are able to do in their unique part of the supply chain. And we've seen some good examples of that, but of course, you know, we would be happily encouraged to do better on that front.
And so, Sabine, if you do better in your world, what would that mean?
Well, I think, look,
like
I think
concrete change across all of the signatories.
I think we've seen indicators of it over the last couple of months around COVID. So we saw the networks come in with the network relief package. We saw the retailers go out with awareness. What we want to do, though, is have a really joined up response. So if you're a generator, you're understanding that you have a role in your communities, and you can also contribute to support customers. That will look different to what a network can do or what a retailer can do. But let's not all go out with different messages. Let's make it clear, and this is what we tried to do in the We've Got You campaign, that we have got you as a sector, and that we're not going to duplicate unnecessarily, which I think is a fair criticism of the past, but that we're joined up in terms of what is our responsibility in our part of the supply chain. And that means communicating with other parts of the supply chain in terms of what roles and responsibilities we are going to take and play, so we can genuinely support customers and communities at this incredibly difficult time.
Could I ask how the Charter is anticipating the entry into the energy business of hundreds and thousands of small players in terms of solar, batteries, electric vehicles, all those sorts of things, who probably are more aligned to the customer end than the energy signatory end? And there's a big gap between the big companies and these players. So where do they fit in the future of the Charter and the relationship to the signatories?
I think there's a couple of things there. I think they push expectations of customer experience, and they also increase the kind of universe of stakeholders that companies have to deliver for, and certainly retailers. In terms of customer experience, retailers are on the front end of that, and we see some, without mentioning names, we see some pretty interesting developments amongst some of the retailers in terms of how they're, innovating their business models, making acquisitions, to try to be more au fait with that new world. And then we're seeing it with the network companies as well in terms of actually how they grapple with delivering this massive transition, and how they're going to cope with, zero minimum net demand in the middle of the day and so on. And certain states like South Australia are right on the front end of that. So I think it's an operational challenge, it's a customer service challenge, and it also means there are more stakeholders out there that people have got to work with. Ultimately, it's competition, right? Competition is good.
And what about the managing of all the sort of bad debts that are likely to emerge? Or is there a sense of, because of the various income supports and protections, that you just don't have a handle on what that's going to be, and so you're not working on that together yet?
I think, and we're still, I think, mostly, in the calm before the storm is my feel. And again, the retailers are closer to this, and so my personal experience as a network company, we're less close to this. But really, I would say it's only in the last couple of months or so, and mostly in Victoria, that we're starting to hear signs now of, an uptick in people presenting as distressed. So I think this really still sits ahead of the sector in a significant way. But I do think this support that governments have given us hopefully has given industry time to prepare.
Yeah, I mean, the reality has been, just in my other life, those income, particularly the coronavirus supplement, for people on Social Security, we actually almost ended poverty in Australia overnight.
Yeah,
that's what that did. And we've just plunged hundreds of thousands of people back below the poverty line with removing that additional Social Security. So there will be this bit which is to the bit about sort of shared efforts, where actually there are some circumstances that are out of your control. It is about incomes.
it is.
And whether you have work underway to have your voice as an advocate over other actors that need to do their bit. You have to do your bit, but given the insights that you've got and the access to the data that you've got, and there is a risk that is managed instead of, empowering the customer voice that you have a picture of so powerfully, and using that and empowering that and taking some responsibility as an industry to be a voice on those issues. Is that part of the plan? Is there a way that the panel can also help to encourage that kind of collaboration?
I think it's certainly something the panel can help to encourage, and making an observation that more visibility and transparency on this as we go through, into next year, and this probably starts to bite, I think would be good. The AER and so on have, and ESC in Victoria have instituted reporting around all this stuff, and actually the frequency of that reporting has come back a bit because there haven't been the numbers so far. But that may change. Yeah. And so I think, what's the role of the sector? Absolutely, we need to be across what's happening. We need to be communicating what's happening. We need, to Claire's point, to be close so that we're seeing the leading indicators and we're able to react. We need to be more empathetic and more flexible than perhaps we have been in the past. But of course, and this is where it gets difficult, we cannot, as a sector, fix the income problem. If incomes are collapsing, we cannot fix that. I mean, we can do things to help mitigate it. There are things that we can do, but fundamentally we can't fix the income problem. And so, if there really does come a big wave of, real significant income distress, then it's going to be tough times. It's going to be tough times. And we don't, speaking frankly, we don't want to turn the utility sector, into the airlines or the travel sector or a sector which then becomes significantly distressed, because that's not a helpful outcome for anybody either. So there will need to be, if that wave comes, there'll be some difficult conversations, no question.
So is it safe to say then, though, that your role in recognising the emerging problem, because you've got some good leading indicators through usage patterns and those sorts of things, you can play a significant role in the planning for what could potentially come next, and to look at different data by state and by sector, because it will differ. So look at Queensland now as a state that's moved out of a COVID lockdown, albeit the tourism industry is a separate thing, and looking at how that's responding and things that are working there, and what's happening in New South Wales and Victoria is probably going to be, let's face it, Victoria will probably be the one that cops the worst of this, because we're embedding lockdown for much longer. So are there different leading indicators that we can pick up on that will give us a hint on what needs to happen to avoid the worst of the outcomes that we were fearing? So there's probably a role you can play there in that planning phase.
I think so, and there is, there's hardcore reporting to AR and so on, but there's probably more that can be done, whether it's by the Energy Charter or other bodies, right, to speak one voice on what's happening out there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, we're out of time, unless there are any other questions that have to be asked at this moment from Andrew or Cassandra.
I was just going to invite either of you to ask any questions or give a reflection of what you would like to see out of the panel process.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
And mine.
Given your experience last time.
I'll let Sabine comment as well. I mean, I think there's various phrases which are used for this. One is sort of critical friend, right? I think constructive feedback on what's good and where the opportunities are for improvement. That's what we're looking for. That would be extremely helpful. I think that sort of critical friend approach.
It does feel like last year's report, my impression is it's like we turned a fire hose on you and you just couldn't drink from it. So rather than trying to drink, it seems like you just turned your back on it. That's a perception. So maybe with this year, we're all sort of trimmed down and trying to focus on the top things. Maybe that will help you to drink from it a little bit more, that not being a fire hose. Recognizing though, I guess there's a disappointment from me a little bit, is that not everyone has looked back at the 2019 report and brought some of those things forward, or it's not obvious where that's happened. And that's a bit of a disappointment. There are some people who've actually done really well in linking back. Others haven't been as direct in linking back. And that's a little bit of a disappointment, because there's a lot of good stuff in that, albeit it was a substantial report.
And I think, one of the lessons, and, my references to internally focused at the beginning of the year, I think one of the things that happened is we probably, with the benefit of hindsight, didn't program in what would happen once the report was delivered enough. And so it sort of landed, and we didn't have a sort of plan as how to deal with it. And then it was Christmas and bushfires, and then shortly after bushfires it was COVID, and there might have been some floods in between, I think, from memory. And so it's sort of, we weren't well prepared, I think, in that sense. And I think, Sabine and the team have done a good job this year in pre-programming some of that. So I think we have sessions scheduled for when the report lands, and so hopefully we don't drop the ball if that's the right.
It seemed a bit like that episode where the Roadrunner eventually caught the coyote, and he just didn't know what to. The coyote eventually caught the Roadrunner, and didn't know what to do with it. But we're all learning on this, aren't we, Ben? So it's yeah.
Sabine, from you, was there anything you wanted to? What would help you?
Look, I think the Energy Charter has incredibly unique architecture. we report up to a CEO council. We've got a senior group of industry working group members. Suggestions and guidance in terms of how we can really leverage that infrastructure for the sort of change that you want to see delivered for customers would be very helpful.
It might be, and this might be a bit of work for myself to do, just in terms of getting across the Better Together initiatives and some of the analysis of that, because I think in providing a report, which will be frank, because that's what you want, right? It is that's the job of the critical friend, then, but in terms of taking up the outcomes of this report, I think it will have more likely, will succeed in it being taken up if it builds on existing work you've got going on.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really useful, Sabine, to see, the Better Together initiatives, and maybe we can just get I don't know whether it's a specific briefing, or whether that's just something I need to do if the others are across them very well. But I think, to put a whole other layer of work on top of them won't necessarily be that useful.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Cassandra. And obviously we're more than happy to provide that additional briefing if it's needed.
And it might be a bit of a further down the track, I think, just to sort of see what we've come up with independently, and then seeing where you might take up some of those, that work. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. That will drive out the discussions of the panel, and following this meeting and the meetings with all the other CEOs. But even from my new eyes, it's certainly been a progression from last year's War and Peace to a much more focused approach that has been easier for everyone. So hopefully we can continue to refine this, get signatories really focused on not just what you've got to do to comply, but above and beyond where the movement is, what really does these words like customer-centric really mean, all those things. So I think we've learned a lot, and at least we're moving forward. But there are some real challenges ahead, I think, in the next year. So thank you very much. But we're very supportive of I think it's fair to say, of the Charter, and we will certainly make a contribution as a critical friend. So thank you very much for your time, and we will see you at the end of the process.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.